guys, it's Jessica from Peace Love Books, and today I'm here with the second half of my October wrap-up. I only read 6 books in the second half of the month, which is not a lot, but I've already finished 3 books in the first 3 days of November. I just get into like really busy periods, and then I'll read like 5 books in a row. So I traveled a ton in September. I went to so many different places, had so many different trips, and it was just a very busy month. So I didn't read a ton. I read 17 books total, which feels like a lot, but I only read 6 in the second half. So we will go ahead and get started on these books. I did read them for a reading vlog. I think I'm going to post the vlog first, so go watch that vlog where I read BookTuber's fall recommendations, and I have read so many good books. So, oh wait, yeah, so I read 6, yes. The first book that I finished was my Patreon book club pick for my Nora Roberts read-along, where we're reading a Nora book a month, and we read Inheritance. I almost said The Mirror, which is book 2, but we read Inheritance, and this book was so good. I did give it 5 stars. The heroine inherits a haunted house from her estranged uncle that she didn't know existed. Her father had a twin she didn't know even like existed. So he dies and leaves her this house, and it is haunted, where every bride in that house is basically murdered by a ghost. And so the heroine immediately like realizes this house is really strange and haunted, but she moves there because she had a horrible breakup with her ex, and they worked together, and he was the worst like trash human ever, and sabotages her at work, and she's just like, I can't do this anymore. She does like, I think like graphic stuff for people, and so she does like do some freelancing stuff now, like website design, stuff like that, on her own, because she's forced to, because her ex is trash and like they won't do anything that he's like sabotaging her. So she moves to this mansion, and it's spooky, but she falls for, I believe it's like her cousin's friend, like her cousin she didn't know existed, and he is the best, and she ends up getting a dog, which was really cute in here. But it's spooky sometimes. Like there is like this malicious ghost, but there's also like friendly ghosts that live there. Like one of them like does her dishes for her and like leaves out clothes for date nights for her. Another one like plays fetch with her dog. Some of the ghosts are nice ghosts that like died in the house, but there is this just very malevolent spirit that lives there as well that's like actually pretty creepy. And so this does end on a very big cliffhanger, so I'm very excited to see where the book goes. I just had so much fun reading this. It was the perfect spooky season book, and it's the first paranormal I've read by Nora, like fully paranormal, where the suspense was with the paranormal, and I actually really liked it. So 5 stars, super excited that I read this, really enjoyed. Then I picked up Rewitched for reading BookTuber's fall recommendations, and this one I'm giving 3.5 stars. I feel like I can't give it a full 4 because it's definitely a slower paced book. It's definitely very cozy, and I think with cozy you do need to remember the plot definitely goes slower. So the heroine's a witch, but she really hasn't been using her powers to her full potential, and she doesn't know that when you turn, I think it's 30, you get like summoned and judged basically by your powers on whether you get to keep them or not. And so they go through her history of using magic, and they're like, you really started out really great, but they're like, you have not been doing well with your magic, and you're kind of like selfish, not using it correctly. And so she's terrified she's gonna lose her magic, and she doesn't really know how to use it that well. And so they give her like a mentor to help her use her magic and like go through all these trials. And one of the witches, I think he's a witch, I don't know if they called the men witches, but one of them in this like society is like supposed to like check in on her, and it's also like their kind of romance, and it was good. It was cute. I really liked it. She does work in a bookstore where the owner's son is like really awful and like ruining the bookstore, and she's just like doesn't know if she wants to work there or not. I would have loved a little bit more scenes in the bookstore. There was just a lot of this that had to do with like her very slowly learning her powers. It's definitely a very slower paced plot, and I would have liked a little bit more of like the cozy bookstore vibes in here, but it was really fun, very perfect to read in fall, so I still gave it 3.5 stars. Then I listened to the audiobook of Beyond the Highland Mist by Karen Marie Moaning. This is a reread. I read it for our Historical Hellions book club, and this one I gave 3.5 stars. So when I first read it, I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. It is a time travel romance, and it's just very fun. Like, it's supposed to be over the top. It's supposed to be kind of like a cheeky historical romance. So the heroine, it's kind of like Midsummer Night's Dream. So like vibes of Midsummer Night's Dream in a historical setting for like the Shakespeare play. This one, our heroine hates men. She had a really horrible boyfriend who I think was like part of the mafia. So she ended up like killing him, and I'm pretty sure she killed him because she's like very traumatized by what had happened, and like in self-defense kind of thing, like not just murdering him in cold blood. And so she's like sworn off all men, especially like gorgeous men. And then we have the historical setting where the hero is this just like very suave Highlander who sleeps around with everybody and everybody wants him, and the king hates him for reasons that you learn. And so the king is like, I need him to have someone who would never give in to his desires, because he literally sleeps with whoever, whenever. And so he sends Puck, which is basically like the Puck from Midsummer Night's Dream, to find him someone who would never fall for him. And he goes to the future, I think it's like Seattle, and she finds the heroine and she's like, I hate gorgeous men. And so then he's like, perfect, brings her back to the past to marry him, because they have demanded he marry another clan's like chief's daughter, or amicable relations between the Highland clans, and he says if they don't marry, he's just gonna like demolish them all. So she has to take the place of this daughter because the daughter's dad actually murdered her, and so she has to marry him, and it's her kind of realizing she's been thrown into the past and living that life as this woman, having to marry him. So they do have to get married. It's marriage of convenience. I thought it was super fun. Like, it's not the best historical romance ever, but I thought the time travel was really fun. The heroine's definitely very strong-headed, and she does not want to listen to the hero, and the hero is like, oh my gosh, but like, I really like you. So he really falls for her and just really wants her, and I just thought their dynamic was really fun. People really hated this book in the live show, but I gave it 3.5 stars. I think it definitely could have been better. Like, on reread, I didn't love it as much as when I started it, because I think I read it when I hadn't read a bunch of historical romances. So like, as a beginner, it was really a fun place to start. It's a very fast-paced plot. It's very easy to get into, and it kind of reads like a little bit more contemporary than historical romances do, but like I said, fun story, 3.5 stars. Then I finally listened to the audiobook of Bride by Ellie Hazelwood, and I loved this. Give me a hero who like quietly pines for the heroine any day. They have a marriage of convenience, so they are betrothed because he is a werewolf and she's a vampire, and they used to betroth like a vampire and a werewolf for like amicable relations between the two species, and they decide to do that again, so they are ordered to marry each other. And the heroine has had a tricky past because she was actually placed to live among humans as like kind of not a sacrifice, as like an offering from the vampires, and now she is being like basically used again. She really doesn't like her father. And so the beginning is her having this marriage of convenience with the hero, and she assumes, and the woman that she like had to swap places with is who she thinks is his mate. Surprise, surprise, it's not his mate. We kind of know whose mate it is because this is a fated mates romance, but she thinks that he is in agony because his mate is actually gone and having to go marry someone else, and that she's just like in this place. And it is so good because he's literally like obsessed with her smell, to the point where she touched a piece of his clothing, and so he ripped it off and carried it around with him everywhere. Like, I cannot with this man. He is so obsessed with her, and you kind of try to figure out who is trying to sabotage this peaceful alliance between the species, because they don't have like that great of a past, but they can get along if they really try, and there's people who don't want them to. And so it does get really action-packed in the last like 25%, which I thought was really fun. I did really like it, and it's just great them like trying to talk through like why their species hate each other, and like their opinions and their stereotypes of each other and their assumptions. And I had so much fun. Like, this was so good. Their chemistry was amazing. The hero just was obsessed with her, and I loved that. 5 stars. This was so good. Then for my booktuber fall recommendation video, I did read One Dark Window, and this one I'm giving 4 stars. I went into this thinking I was going to be wholly obsessed with it, and I did really enjoy it. It definitely didn't feel like the magic system and like world was built up that big. Like, it felt pretty simple. There are these like cards that are magic cards that people collect and give them powers, but like the more you use them, the more you kind of give up of yourself, and there are consequences using them. And the heroine had accidentally touched a card when she was little, and I think it's the nightmare card, and the soul inside that card lives in her head now. So it's this really creepy monster man who lives in her head since she was little, and that is her kind of gift with cards, is that she will absorb them if she touches them. And so nobody knows this about her, but she can also like see where a card is when she's like in the room, same room as it, because of the monster living inside of her. And so the hero is trying to collect all of the cards for a specific reason. And he does have a card, and he has a different kind of power when it comes to the card, which is really interesting. They kind of have to like fake court because he runs into her and realizes something about her and wants to use her to help him in his like end goal, and so they have to have like a reason why they'd be around each other, so they do have, it's like fake dating, and I did really like it. I do think it was a little too insta-love for my taste, and I really wanted more out of this romance. That a book that I finished today, that'll be in next month's wrap-up, gave me everything I needed in the romance, and this one was just lacking a little bit. So I did really enjoy this. The ending was really, really good, and I really liked the development of her and what was going on with things. I don't want to spoil it, but like the ending was actually really, really good, and I liked the cliffhanger it ended on because this is a duet, so I'm definitely intrigued to read the second book to see how it ends, but it was really good. And I'm excited to see where it goes, but I wanted a little bit more from it. And to end this video, I read a book for our podcast. Tori and I will have a podcast episode next week on this book, and that is The Boyfriend by Freida McFadden. So I've never read Freida McFadden. I've dabbled in thrillers, and I will preface this by saying one of my favorite thrillers is No Exit by Taylor Adams. Like, I really like really good thrillers with like really good twists, okay? So I was really excited to read Freida. I heard the twists in her books are so good. This one is the new one. I even bought the Barnes & Noble edition that has like really fun stuff, and I was surprised by the writing in this. I am giving this one 3 stars, and I'm kind of grappling between giving it lower. So when I first started this, I read the first half physically, and then I listened to the second half on audio. And I will say it got better on audio, because when I was reading this physically, the writing was not the best. The writing is very simple, and it's so much telling us instead of showing us. And it had a lot of, the heroine would be like, oh, remind myself never to do that again. So it had like, it kind of like took you out of the story, because she was commentating on things that happened in what was being written. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it kind of like threw me off, and it felt very juvenile, a lot of her perspectives, and kind of very over the top and dramatic. And so it just didn't feel very realistic, I guess. I don't know how I want to explain this, but I was very taken aback by the writing style. It just felt very simple and very telling, not showing. And so once I got the audio in though, like I didn't notice the writing style as much because I was listening to it instead of physically reading it, which was better for me with this one. But this is about our heroine who goes on a date and it ends horribly, and then meets this doctor and starts dating him, and she realizes that there is a serial killer on the loose murdering people that they date in a similar way. So one of her friends was murdered, and so you kind of unravel this mystery, and I feel like there were not a lot of relationships developed. Like her best friend was murdered, and well, one of her friends was murdered, and I feel like I was like, I didn't even like really grasp your relationship with that person because they were dead so fast, and I just feel like there was not a lot of development in any of the relationships and didn't really build. And it's like, it's a contemporary book, but like you can still world build in a contemporary. You have to world build in every book. And I just felt like there wasn't a lot of like building of anything. It was just like we were dropped in the story and just followed this girl. And I would have loved to see her relationships with people. I would have loved to understand like what she does and like day to day. Like there was not a lot of that built. And then the twist was not that shocking. And the ending, I was like, what? So I want something like No Exit by Taylor Adams had such a good twist, like on top of each other, and I was like, this is so good. And it was like actually scary. I was never like really scared of this one because I felt like it was so kind of dramatized and over the top that it never felt really like realistic enough for me to be scared, which I really like in my thrillers. I like it to be like, oh, I could see myself in this situation, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck, because the heroine was not smart in this book, and it was just meh. So like I'm kind of going more towards like a 2-star. I just did not enjoy this. Maybe it's because this author's not for me, but are there better ones? Because that I go into them with high expectations of a twist because I feel like that's what she's known for, and the twist was not unsettling or shocking. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay. But I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'd be really intrigued to know because people love this book and people love her, but it was just all right for me. This is a really cool edition though because the blood spatter is like raised. It's really cool, but not for me. And those are all the books that I read in the second half of October. I will be sure to link below my first half wrap up if you want to see it. But if you have made it this far, leave me a moon emoji for Bride. So leave me an emoji of the moon to let me know you made it this far. Let me know what you read this month and what your favorites were and what you thought of the books I read. I would love to hear, and that's all I have. As always, thank you so much for watching and have a good day. Bye.